At 17 in the morning, I saw someone standing at the end of the hotel hallway. I watched them for almost a full minute. They didn't move. Then they slowly raised one hand and pointed directly at the camera. The problem was that hallway had been empty 4 hours, and according to the security logs, nobody had entered that floor. I used to think working the night shift at a hotel would be boring. Most of the guests were asleep. The lobby was usually empty, and after midnight, there wasn't much to do besides checking people in, answering the phone, and watching the security cameras. The hotel wasn't particularly old, but parts of it felt that way. There were 4 floors. The 4th floor was mostly used for long-term guests, and at night it was usually completely silent. I had been working there for about 6 months when something strange happened. It started on a Tuesday night. I was sitting behind the front desk around 1:40 a.m. when I heard the elevator doors open. I looked up. Nobody came out. I assumed someone had gone back up before I looked over. A few seconds later, the doors closed. I went back to watching the security monitors. About 20 minutes later, I noticed something on the 4th floor camera. A hallway light was on. That wasn't unusual. What was unusual was that the light at the very end of the hallway had been turned off earlier that night. I watched the camera for a few seconds, then I saw someone walk past it. Just a person, dark jacket, dark pants, nothing unusual about them. Except I hadn't seen anyone enter the 4th floor. I checked the elevator camera, nothing. I checked the stairwell, nothing. I thought maybe they had already been on the floor. So I didn't think much about it, until the phone rang, front desk. A woman asked me if everything was okay on the 4th floor. I asked her why. She said she had heard someone walking outside her room. I checked her room number. She was in 406. I told her I would check the hallway. I took the elevator upstairs. When the doors opened, the hallway was completely empty. The lights were on, every door was closed. I walked slowly toward room 406, nothing. I asked the woman if she was okay. She opened the door slightly. She looked nervous. She told me she had heard footsteps stop directly outside her room. Then she heard someone whisper something. I asked what they said. She told me she couldn't understand it. I checked the hallway again. There was nobody there. I told her it was probably another guest. She closed the door. I went back downstairs. At the front desk, I checked the cameras again. The 4th floor hallway was empty, but when I rewound the footage, I saw something that bothered me. At 2:03 a.m., someone walked past room 406. They stopped. Then they stood completely still for almost 30 seconds. After that, they continued walking. I couldn't see their face. The camera angle was too far away. I zoomed in, nothing. I checked the other cameras. The person appeared on none of them. I told myself it was just a guest, then I noticed the timestamp. The person had appeared on camera at 2:03, but the elevator log showed that nobody had reached the 4th floor between 1:30 and 2:20. That was strange. I called my supervisor. He told me not to worry about it. He said the camera system sometimes missed people when the elevators were busy. I accepted that explanation, at least for that night. The next evening, I came to work at 11 p.m. One of the housekeepers mentioned something while we were talking. She said a guest from the 4th floor had complained about someone standing outside her room during the night. I asked which room. I asked her if the guest had described the person. She said the guest claimed it was a man wearing dark clothes. I immediately remembered the camera footage from the previous night. I didn't tell her about it. I just went back to work. Around a.m., I started watching the 4th floor camera more carefully. Nothing happened. 2:05. Nothing. 2:10. Nothing. Then, at 2:17. I saw the same figure. They appeared at the very end of the hallway. I leaned closer to the monitor. The person was standing completely still. I checked the elevator camera. Nothing. I checked the stairwell. Nothing. The person was simply there. I watched for almost a minute. Then they slowly raised one hand and pointed directly toward the security camera. I froze. I couldn't see their face. But I suddenly had the feeling that they knew I was watching. I grabbed the radio. I called the security guard. No answer. I called my supervisor. No answer. Then the figure lowered their hand. They turned around and walked toward room 406. I immediately called the room. The phone rang. No answer. I called again. Still nothing. Then the fourth floor camera went black. I stood up from the desk. For a few seconds, I didn't know what to do. Then I heard the elevator behind me. The doors opened. Nobody was inside. I stared at it. The doors stayed open. Then I heard footsteps. Not from the elevator. From the hallway beside the lobby, slow footsteps, one after another. I looked toward the hallway. Nothing. The footsteps stopped. I didn't move. Then my desk phone rang. I jumped. I picked it up. It was the guest in room 406. She was whispering. He's outside again. I asked her to lock the door. She said it was already locked. Then she whispered, he's not knocking this time. I asked her what she meant. She didn't answer. I heard her breathing. Then she said, he's just standing there. I told her to stay inside and that someone was coming upstairs. I grabbed the master key and took the elevator. When I reached the fourth floor, everything was quiet. I walked toward room 406. The guest opened the door before I could knock. She was crying. I asked her where the person was. She pointed toward the end of the hallway. There was nobody there. I checked every nearby door. Nothing. Then I noticed something. The carpet outside room 406 was wet. There were footprints. They started near the elevator and ended directly outside her door. There were no footprints leading away. I called my supervisor again. This time he answered. I told him what happened. He came to the fourth floor immediately. We checked the security footage together. The footage showed the figure standing outside room 406, then it showed me arriving. Then the figure disappeared, but there was something else. My supervisor paused the footage. He pointed at the elevator. The figure hadn't arrived through the elevator. They hadn't used the stairs either. They had simply appeared at the end of the hallway. I asked him if the cameras were malfunctioning. He said maybe. Then he looked at me and asked, did you notice what they were wearing? I told him, dark jacket, dark pants. He didn't say anything. Instead, he opened an older security recording. He searched through the previous week's footage. Then he found what he was looking for, the same person, standing at the end of the same hallway. But this footage was from 3 nights earlier. We kept watching. The person walked toward room 406, stopped, then disappeared from the camera. My supervisor looked uncomfortable. I asked him what was going on. He finally told me that room 406 had been empty for almost 2 weeks before the current guest checked in. He said the previous guest had complained about footsteps and someone standing outside the room. Management had assumed it was another guest, but there was never any evidence. No one had been caught. No one had been seen entering the floor. My supervisor told me to forget about it. I wanted to. But the next night, I kept checking the cameras. Nothing happened. The night after that, nothing happened either. Then, about a week later, I was working alone again. It was around 17 a.m. I was looking at the fourth floor camera when I saw the figure again. This time, they weren't standing near room 406. They were standing directly in front of the camera. I couldn't see their face, but I could see their clothes. Dark jacket, dark pants, and something else. A small silver name badge on their chest. I couldn't read the name. I leaned closer to the monitor. Then I realized what I was looking at. The badge was the same kind of badge the hotel employees wore. I looked down at my own uniform. I was wearing one too. I looked back at the monitor. The figure slowly raised its hand. This time, it didn't point at the camera. It pointed downward, toward the bottom corner of the screen. I looked. There was another camera feed. The lobby, I switched to it and my stomach dropped. Someone was standing behind the front desk, someone wearing a dark hotel uniform. I was sitting behind that same desk. I turned around. Nobody was there. I looked back at the monitor. The figure behind the desk was gone, then the fourth floor camera suddenly went black. I quit 2 days later. I never found out who the person was. The hotel manager told me the cameras had been malfunctioning. He said there was nothing to worry about. I didn't believe him. A few months later, I spoke to someone who still worked there. I asked if anything strange had happened since I left. He said no. Everything was normal. Then he paused. He told me something I still think about. Room 406 had been permanently taken off the hotel's reservation system. I asked why. He said management had decided not to rent it anymore. I asked him if he knew what happened to the room. He said he did. Then he asked me something. Did you ever see the person on the fourth floor camera? I said yes. There was a long silence. Then he said, "That's strange." I asked why. He told me that the security cameras on the fourth floor had been replaced after I quit. The old footage was deleted, all of it, except for one recording. A technician had accidentally saved a copy of the final night. My old co-worker had watched it, and he said there was something on the recording that nobody had noticed before. The person standing at the end of the hallway wasn't looking at the camera. They were looking directly at the security office. At me, and somehow, they already knew exactly where I was.